to We Read Allegedly, where we allegedly read books. This month's episode is a little bit late because the sick has been running around, in case you haven't been able to tell because of the sultry tones of my voice.
We should totally have you re-record the spoiler section bumper for the bottom shelf while you got this voice going on.
Well, I have this voice approximately twice a year, and it's when the trees decide that they want to make more trees. And so
That's right. You guys get a second spring down there.
Well, the problem is that I have fall and spring allergies. You do the same thing.
I get winter allergies too if we're inside for too long.
I don't the winter only lasts like 2 weeks here, so that's like the only 2 weeks I can actually breathe. But the other voices that you hear are my co-hosts John and Squid.
Guess which one is which?
Hi, it's me, John.
I'm Squid.
Are we doing recent alleged reads, or are we doing...
Yeah, because I don't want to get up.
Okay. So let's I don't remember how this goes. It's been a minute since I've driven.
Let's go get into it.
Let's get into it. So John, tell me about what you've been reading.
Other than this book?
Other than this book, allegedly.
To be perfectly honest, I haven't been. I was telling Squid right before we logged in that this is the first book that I finished since I dropped out of college for this last time, because a book report that I had to do for said college work ruined my love for books for a while. So I haven't been reading at all.
It's like that. Have you seen allegedly that meme where it's like, what's the last book that made you cry? And someone just posts a link to like organic chemistry, 200 little course.
Oh, now if you want to go there with it, then yeah, I'd probably say that it would have been it would have been my anatomy and physiology book in college.
Ew.
Because that's a 3/4 class that they put into a 2/4 workload.
Gross.
Yeah, but in all actuality, I've dabbled in a few books. I've played a little bit with the Dresden Files for book 1. I've started kind of dabbling into the book we're doing for next month, which is, well, we'll announce that at the end of the podcast.
Or will we?
Maybe.
We'll see if we remember by the end.
So, but nothing of real big import, I think.
Okay, well, Squid, what have you allegedly been reading?
A lot.
I've noticed.
Yeah, I've actually read books recently. It's backlog.
Impressed.
Booklog Golf on the good old Geek Devotions Network. So I've been cruising through books recently.
You have. I've been very impressed.
Pick 1 through 10, and whatever one it is, I'll talk about.
5.
Let's see. Oh, Hester. So I read Hester a week and a half ago. It is a reimagining historical fiction about the woman that inspired the Scarlet Letter.
Oh, you told me about that one.
Yeah.
I remember you talking about that in our Discord chat as well.
Yeah. So like Nathaniel Hawthorne is a character in the book that comes to this town and meets this woman who is like an Irish immigrant and gets accused of witchcraft, kind of, but not in like the burned at the stake or sewing letters onto her clothing, so to speak. But she also has synesthesia, so like letters have color to her when she hears them, which is why A is red in the book. And there's just like a lot of different ways she has incorporated what the Scarlet Letter actually means to this character. And Nathaniel Hawthorne being kind of a trash man.
Well, you just have to read the Scarlet Letter to know that.
Here's the thing. The only thing I know about Nathaniel Hawthorne is what I hear people talk about him when they bring up his books. And a large consensus of people I hear that talk about Nathaniel Hawthorne all think, screw that guy specifically.
Screw his writing in particular. But right. I think he was probably just a funky little dude. Like, he wasn't actually a terrible man. He was just like, I'm going to go write my books in my little closet. And he shouldn't have.
So, like, what is it about his right? Like, because this has me curious. Because I used to listen to a lot of the McElroys
Mhm.
before I cut out a lot of politically charged podcasting, and Justin McElroy in particular has like almost an unparalleled hatred for the books of Nathaniel Hawthorne.
He hasn't met me in Celeste, so
I've never read anything other than The Scarlet Letter. And
why
I,
would you?
I was forced to read Scarlet Letter. And my issue with it is the way he talks about women is not fantastic.
Um,
Also, the version that I read was in the Old English.
It's written in like Middle English, and it's rough.
It's hard. And like it had the original spelling too.
oh, so like that book that Steve recommended to us that one time. I
Oh,
forget what
the
it's called.
Sinner, the Confessions of a.
Something like that.
I don't remember.
Hold
But
on, because I have it. Private
Greetings to
Memoirs.
Steve McDonald if you're listening.
hello, we miss you. And your dad
Memoirs of
jokes.
a Justified Sinner. There we go. Private Memoirs of a Justified Sinner is the book you mentioned.
But that end in my 14-year-old feminist little brain, it wasn't fair. Like, and it was the dumbest ending.
Can I ask you this? Did you take into account the time period
No,
that the book was? Okay, I was about to say because you have
no.
the thing with all communication, and I learned this in my interpersonal communications class in college, is you have when reading the written word and hearing a message being communicated, you have to take in all aspects of the author or the origination of the message, including the culture and time period from which the message comes from. So,
Right. So I was 14, so that was not a thing for me yet.
I suppose.
I also closely relate it to The Lord of the Rings
Hmm.
because I had been loaned the original, the the first book, the what am words?
Fellowship of the Ring.
Yes, I'd been loaned the Fellowship of the Ring, and I was in a. I read this book for a co-op. My mom did not make me read this book. The co-op made me read this book, and so my friend brought it to co-op and passed me the book. And the teacher, who we have theological differences, and she was very blatant about it and was using the book to try to push those theological differences.
Which book?
Um,
Lord of the
the,
Rings
the
or
Scarlet Letter.
okay. Just looking for clarification because we now have brought up two different titles.
Yeah. So she goes, "Well, make sure you read the Scarlet Letter first." And so I was
Don't.
like, "What? Why?"
It's rough.
I was like, "Ma'am, you underestimate how many books I read at one time."
For a second there, I thought you were going to tell me that your teacher with the theological differences was one of those people who was going to say that the Lord of the Rings promotes witchcraft, which is a thing that I had heard when the movie started coming out. Now, y'all don't know anything about the author, do you?
I heard that too, but no,
Or
no, no.
witchcraft, probably.
I think
Well,
my
that too.
issues more from the book stem from the fact that I was like, "Why are you making a 14-year-old read this?"
I
Like
think that's how old I was when I was reading it too.
a group of 14-year-olds. Why are
When
we talking about adultery?
okay, when I was in high school, it was reading for the advanced placement junior English class.
Yeah.
So seeing a 14-year-old, I'm like, no,
Yeah,
that they didn't even public school systems didn't put that on you until you were 16 or 17.
right. So it was just, and the class the year before I got into, I because they did it by grade. Before I was in that grade, were reading books that I was super interested in, and so I was reading my books and for my literature class and their books at the same time, and so I was very frustrated when the teachers changed, and
Ah,
all of the sudden everything is Puritan based.
I still submit as well, and this has stuck with me for since the day that I read most of this book. Not all of it.
Allegedly.
Pearl, which is Hester Prynne's child in the book, is
Mhm.
described in such a way that I'm convinced this man was like, this is a demon.
Yeah.
That child is the scariest thing Pearl is what I see standing at the end of the bed, eyes open, unblinking.
I know that there are multiple endings, like there's different versions of the book ending. Some of them it's the man, the pastor, the priest, the
Mhm.
whatever he was, I don't remember. I'm 36. It's been a minute.
Yes,
Um
the priest.
like he pulls open his shirt and there's a carved into his chest and then he dies.
Yep.
And then some of them they just burn her at the stake. I don't remember which one I read, but I know that it felt far more supernatural than the entire rest of the book had been, so it felt like it didn't fit.
Well, they have like the priest is supposedly dying just because he feels guilty.
I mean,
So he needs to confess his sin in order to stop dying, which
there
is a good theological
Wait,
point to hold
so
to.
did Nathaniel Hawthorne write several endings to this book, or
I think so.
that's so stupid?
I think that what happened is that the first one people were like, "Bro, this don't make sense,"
Yeah,
and so he changed it.
I wouldn't be surprised if a church also was like, "You can't put that out there."
I don't know. Nathaniel Hawthorne was kind of anti-church.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean they weren't controlling it. Some part of a
No,
publishing of a book about
that's also
Puritans. So
That's also fair.
you never know. Who's to say? This is all speculation, allegedly.
Yeah, and the best part about this is we weren't even talking about the book that Squid was talking about. We were talking about the book that
Thank
the
you.
book was about that Squid was talking about.
Thank you for the sidetrack where we trash Nathaniel Hawthorne for no reason.
It will probably happen again.
It will. What are you reading, Celeste?
I am reading Tress of the Emerald Sea right now. And that one is no, I don't want you to translate. Go away. Sorry, I pulled up the Google write-up of Tress and the Emerald Sea. It is Brandon Sanderson's take on The Princess Bride. So what if Buttercup hadn't stayed home when she heard that Wesley was in danger? What if she had jumped on a ship to go save him? And
I feel like it's right up your alley.
It is right up my alley, and it is a delightful little story. It's also hysterical. There are let me get to my highlights. I have highlighted so many funny things because it's also very tongue in cheek. Like, hang on, let me see. When she's telling her parents that she wants to go sail the seas to go save her love, it says both listened quietly as she spoke. This was, in part, because she'd baked them quail egg pies. It's more difficult to object to your daughter's temporary insanity when your mouth is full. Like,
It's true.
it's true. So there's just some really, really funny things. At one point it goes, well, parents have things to say like that. They're required to see the best in their children. Otherwise, living with the little sociopaths would drive the person mad. That's
Also true.
It sounds
funny.
really weird that this is a Brandon Sanderson book because
It's
that doesn't sound like the Brandon Sanderson that I know.
Yeah, there wasn't a single piece of world building in there.
well, it's part of the Cosmere series, so I think that it's supposed to already have had some world building.
That's never stopped him before.
That's also fair because it's Brandon Sanderson. But this was this was his first one of the secret projects. So the whole world locked down, and Brandon Sanderson went, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to
Write 5 books.
and then put them on Kickstarter and get it funded within the
Make
first 10 hours.
Stupid amount of money from it too.
I was, at the time, I hadn't read any of his stuff, and I was so mad that I didn't have the money to back it, even though when I found out about it, it was already backed. I'm like, but I want these books.
Well, you know who did their part? Not
Would
me,
that be you,
but
Squid?
Karen. Karen did her part.
I thought you were going to say you did, Squid.
No, I wouldn't.
That
I
sounds
don't
like
think
a lie.
Sanderson's not for me.
But you like the world building.
I do. It's a bit much.
He does a lot. Like it.
Bit
Oh, I
much.
know. I tried to read the first book of the Stormlight archive.
I have been told that that's not a good book to start with his writing, even though that is the first book of his that I read.
I am still partially through Mistborn. Cool world. Very fascinating. I don't need to know that much. Just a little bit less. Not too much, but a little bit less would be good.
You sound like me with the book that we read this month.
And yet somehow a little bit more was needed too, wasn't it?
Well, speaking of which, let's get into talking about that book. Okay, so the book that we are reading this month is called Neverwhere by Neil Gaimen. And the Goodreads synopsis of it is: under the streets of London, there is a world most people could never, ever even dream of. A city of monsters and saints, murderers and angels, knights in armor, and pale girls in black velvet. Neverwhere is the London of the people who have fallen between the cracks. Strange destinies lie in wait in London below, a world that seems eerily familiar, but a world that is utterly bizarre, peopled by unearthly characters such as an angel called Islington, a girl named Dor, and the Earl who holds court in a tube train. Now, a single act of kindness has catapulted a young businessman, Richard Mayhew, out of his safe and predictable life and into the realms of Neverwhere. Richard is about to find out more than he ever wanted to know about this other London, which is a pity, because Richard just wants to go home.
Okay, when they called this, for as much as they use the word Neverwhere in that description, they never use it in the book. Like, it was always London below. Like, I almost wonder if, because everything was London below, if the original title of this book was Underwear until Neil Gaiman thought better of it.
Underwear? Yeah, I kept waiting for Neverwhere to be like the title is something. Nope, it was.
I mean,
not.
don't get me wrong.
Oh.
It's a good title, but
It is.
It's not used in the book. It has nothing to do with anything in the book.
No, it doesn't. It really doesn't. I don't know. This is one of those books that I think this is the third time I've read it, because
That's
I read
wild to me.
Well, I read it as a teenager, and then I borrowed the audiobook from the library when I was like right after Dallas and I got married, and then I read it this time.
What drew you to this book, Celeste?
It's just a fun world to play in to me. Like, it's not so much the story as it is I want to go to Under London.
I can get that. To be perfectly honest, like it felt a lot like the Fred books to a
Yeah.
certain extent, a dark version of the Fred books when it comes to the world building. I know nobody asked, but like for me, this was a story of two opinions fighting with each other the entire time I was in this book. And yes, Mama Squid, I did finish it this time. I did it specifically with you in mind. I couldn't bear the scorn or disappointment of hearing that you would be disappointed in me that I didn't finish another book. So,
well, it would only be if it was a good book.
If she likes it.
If she likes the book. I'm not saying anything about this book. I just mean if she likes the book and finishes it, she'd be sad that you didn't.
Because I feel justified in that Mama Squid appreciated my thoughts on one of the books. Oh, Shark Heart.
Yep.
She also thought Shark Heart was dumb. I was like, yes.
But as far getting back to what I was saying though, I really enjoyed the world. I'm with Celeste on that. Like, I really enjoyed the world that was there. I just didn't feel like he did anything worthwhile in it. Like, the entire time we were reading this, I kept shooting messages to our side chat that we have that it constantly felt like he was faffing around in scenes for unnecessary reasons. He spent so much time trying to set up like Chekhov's guns all over the places and other literary devices that it felt like the plot was an afterthought, and like he didn't know what the characters were doing until they got to where they were going.
This is like the one pressing thing that I felt the entire time I was reading this book is that it is the opposite of 50% of young adult novel tropes, which is to say 50% of young adult novels is a teenage girl somehow being the savior of the world for reasons we cannot understand. This book was just a man who didn't need to be here.
Who really just wanted to go home.
But that wasn't even like a strong enough motivation for me to care about him. Like, I was just like, so why don't they just, if you're clearly so unaware of what's happening here, why don't they just put you somewhere safe and go finish the story themselves and come back to you at the end?
And he was such a bumbling idiot. Like Richard Mayhew was an idiot. I think this is one of the few stories where I don't like the main character, but
He's
I'm
not
okay with
likable.
that.
Honestly, it's like they took Arthur Dent
Yes.
and stuck him in Fred.
Arthur Dent, Bilbo from The Hobbit,
Mm-hmm.
of the I just want to go home and have my cuppa.
Oh, that never mind. I was like, isn't that Two-Face? But that's Harvey Dent. I was so confused.
No, Arthur Dent's from Hitchhiker's Guide to the
Hitchhiker's Guide.
Galaxy.
Yeah. Yes. I was like, why would Two-Face have anything to do with this? But yes, that makes more sense.
Yes. So it's like I said, it's a fun little world to go play in, to me anyway.
The other frustrating part was, despite the empirical evidence that was constantly before him, his insistence of, "Oh, that's not actually happening," for half of the book. I get it at first, but for half of it's like, okay, I've met some dense people, but this is like mostly unrealistic at this point. Like, people are going to be more willing to believe things than what they gave him credit for, and
Now, as I told John right before we started, I have now consumed this book in all 3 of its versions because I have the physical book, and then I got the ebook so I could read it while I was out to try and get further, and then I finally just broke down and got the audiobook again so I could cruise through it. For a book, so I've listened to about the last 10 hours, which is most of the book, too much of the book.
How long was your book?
14, I think.
about, yeah.
Yeah.
Mine was 3.
Oh, ma'am, you missed a lot of the book then.
Hey, I'm sorry.
A lot
What?
of the book. You got the radio play, my dear.
Yo, what? What? 3? I wish mine was 3 hours. That would have been so much better.
I'm so confused.
Well, while you sort that out, I'll continue. I started listening to this audiobook, and John Michael was with me for most of the time, and about an hour and a half, 2 hours in, he was like, for a book that seems very plot driven, there's no plot, huh?
Yes.
No, there's not.
No. Once again, me and your husband are in complete alignment on opinions.
Except we also didn't care much for the world building. We didn't feel like it was, if you were going to do world building, lean into that more. But he
Or
didn't spend
do
enough
something
time
with it.
Yeah. All of the side characters, even like Dor, interesting character. I know nothing about her and don't really care about her because we never stopped to focus on her really.
This actually, I've got a great analog for this book. This book is icing in the shape of a cake.
But some people like icing.
Because that's what it felt like. It felt like icing in the shape of the cake, and then you cut into it, it's completely hollow on the inside. Because there was a lot of promise to this book. The world building felt like you could have done a lot with it, but in a lot of what he did was just talking about the weather.
Yeah, this man waffled a lot.
I mean, even we can spoil a little bit on this show. Like, we only do this once a month, so I always forget the rules as far as spoiling.
You say whatever you want.
Well,
not whatever you want, but like within reason.
Yeah, I get it.
Within the guidelines.
But like the part where they hired the guy, that one Barney or whatever his name was, to
Old Bailey.
No. The guy who was competing to be Dor's bodyguard. And the wolf and the fox guy.
Yes, Croup and Vandermeer.
Yeah, they hired him to be that, and then Hunter came along and won over him. And then it turned out that she was the inside man in the party for the bad guy, so to speak.
Yeah.
It really was frustrating because that just felt like some Deus Ex Machina type stuff, just because the author felt like, I think there should be a mole in the party.
Yeah, I felt like that's a good point, especially because he kept going back and forth, and you would get Croup and Vandermeer's like perspective.
Mm-hmm.
You can't really pull those bait and switches when you're seeing both sides.
Right.
I felt like this book would have benefited from a like far more zoomed in, limited perspective.
Agreed.
But otherwise, we just kind of get, like you said, kind of world building, but not detailed enough that you really dig in. And not
enough
zoomed out enough, you're getting the plot.
right, and not enough plot to really drive it. And in the Geek Devotions Discord under the We Read Allegedly tab, go join our Discord if you're not already, and you can join our discussions there. I was kind of talking about this book this morning, and someone was asking about what book we're reading, and we had mentioned it, and they had said, "Oh, well, I'll have to check it out after Book Log Golf," and I'm like, if you're, what's more important to you, world building or story or plot pacing? He's like, plot pacing, I think, and I'm like, yeah, don't get this book.
Again, as you know, a matter of world building. It's all well. I also recently finished reading Dune, which is a book that has a lot of world building in it.
A lot of world building.
Fascinating, amazing world building. Well done. And then you also, that's a weird book because the first half is literally just world building and the second half is an action movie. But
and then there's some world building in the midst of all of that.
Yes, not quite as much because he sets up a lot at the beginning, but there, I was just bored. I needed more or less. The book was either too long or not long enough, and I don't know which.
And that's what I'm saying. They're like, this is a story of two opinions that are fighting with each other within me, because there was what was done well. I felt he did really well, but there was a lot of things that I come to books for that he did not do well in this book, that I was shocked, because of my only other experience with Neil Gaiman is Norse mythology, and that was so good to me, to the point where I almost wonder if he does better writing in worlds that already exist, because he doesn't have to do the world building on top of it, so he can just focus on plot.
You would think, as this was my first introduction to Gaiman, although I did have him on my list already to read American Gods later this year, so we'll see if I get through that. But I don't think it was the best introduction, unless all of his books are like this, in which case it was a good introduction and I don't need a second one.
It is not. This is very much a not like his other books, because it does have more of a slower pace to it. Except for maybe the Graveyard Book, which Dallas and I have been reading for close to 2 years.
That's not a good sign.
Well, it's one of those that we picked for me to read out loud. And so I don't always have the energy or the cognizance to be able to read at when we're going to bed, which is generally when we do that. But Coraline is terrifying.
Oh, I forgot he was Coraline.
No, he wrote Coraline.
Yeah, but he might also be Coraline. I've never seen him and Coraline in the same room.
This is fair. Fair.
You never know.
So it's one of those things. The fun story about Coraline is he wrote the book and his editor was like, this may be too scary for kids. And he was like, well, take it home to your kid and see if she thinks it's too scary. And so she did, and her kid was loving it and wanting to read more of it. And so they published it. Well, come to find out, her kid was absolutely terrified, but she wanted to know more.
Yep. Kids are wild.
So I think he does, I don't know. Like I said, I enjoyed this book also because it pokes fun at just the general British mindset of, I'm going to go home and have tea. Like, if that makes sense. The standard character, like Arthur Dent. Arthur? Harvey? Arthur.
No,
Arthur.
Harvey's Two-Face.
We've said the both of them today, and I can't remember which one.
Mr. Dent.
Mr. Dent, who never forgets his towel. It's very much like that, and I very much enjoyed that type of character, just because I too also want to go home and drink a cup of tea, always.
I do think if you are if you're an enjoyable person, congratulations. But if you are a person who enjoys the world building that happens in this book and this idea of like a city under a city that's fantastical, and you enjoy tabletop games, I think listening or watching The Unsleeping City by Dimension 20 is this book but better, and it's based in New York, so you get a bunch of fun New Yorkers. But it's just this idea of like all this magic stuff that's happening under the city called The Unsleeping City. And that's what I was thinking of the whole time I read this book. Very good, though. So if you like tabletop, and Brennan Lee Mulligan, also a master of world building things, has a great time in that little sandbox.
If this is a thing we're doing, what I would recommend would be, again, the Fred the Vampire books for this, because they do a much more focused narrative on certain characters and do the world building as they go. So it's the pacing is a lot better, so to speak. And they try to give more depth to the characters other than this is a person that's in this scenario at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I think the only person that they really made me have any kind of emotions for was Jessica, and my emotion I had for her was utter hatred.
I mean, that's fair. She is not great.
She is a trash person.
I wish the whole book was just Mr. Croup and Mr. Vandermeer.
I would read that.
What a wild duo.
I would love to have a book that's just the Marquis.
Marquis also a wild man.
Well, there's a 30-minute story at the end of the author's preferred text edition of the audiobook.
The one that's not 3 hours long.
Yes.
So that's the one that I'm going to have to get eventually, because
well, I'm about to return it on Libby, so go download it.
I have legitimately been looking for because admittedly, Richard Mayhew is not the best character, but I've been looking for the how the Marquis got his coat, and then the second one, the Seven Sisters, for years, and I can't find them. You cannot locate them. It's like they do not exist.
It is also in the back of this book that I bought for $5. So
Dear Barnes
if you can't find the audiobook, I'll just send you this book, and you can have. I'll just pull out the last few pages, rip them right out, send them to you.
That hurt my soul just hearing you say it. We had a conversation on our chat earlier today about how me and Squid are obsessive about keeping our books as pristine as possible. And when she said something about ripping pages out of that book, part of my skin almost crawled off my body when she said it. It's not good.
There's also a second prologue in here that I didn't realize. It's an altogether different prologue 400 years later.
Ugh.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's
it's only 2 pages though, so. Oh, and it's Mr. Croup and Mr. Vandermeer.
Croup and Vandermeer are fascinating characters.
They made for terrific villains. I will give them that. Albeit a bit unrealistic, because you can't be that bad all the time like that. That just doesn't. At some point, that's going to come back to bite you. And that for as long as they said that they'd been doing what they're doing, it doesn't. It just didn't. It took me out of it a little bit.
The one thing I did appreciate, and perhaps this is just mentally what I was doing in my head, is that he never really describes what a lot of these people look like, aside from slightly foxy or whatever. So the entire cast of this book I pictured as animals, just
I can see that.
animals.
Same.
So the Marquis was definitely just a big cat.
This would definitely
just a cat with a top hat.
This would definitely make for a good
anthropomorphic movie.
I was thinking Muppets.
That too.
Oh, that would be wild.
I would love to see this as a Muppets movie. Love to see this. And poor Richard Mayhew, played by the guy who played Bilbo.
Do you know what I could see this work out as though? An anime.
Yeah.
I think this would work better as an anime than it does as a book, because then you don't have to deal with the mundane internal thoughts of everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I'm so confused because I know there was the show that they had for this one, or miniseries, whatever it is. The Marquis is not how I pictured it.
None of them are how I pictured them. That's the reason why I didn't watch it after I found out it was a thing, because it's just like, this is going to make me mad more than it's going to
That's not a cat with
anything.
a top hat.
I cannot tell you how many times I actually really thought that it was a cat with a top hat. Like, that is how I picture him.
See, I was picturing everybody in this book other than Richard to be like the I forget what they call them in the Fred books, but the people who shift into animals.
Oh.
But I thought everybody was going to shift into an animal at some point, and Croup and Vandermeer were going to turn into foxes and wolves, and Dor was going to turn into a swan, and and they never. The other frustrating thing, one of the biggest plot holes they just left open, was why Richard could see Door at the beginning of the book.
I think that was because he regularly saw people and tried to be a nice human being.
Her only response, really, though, is, that was quite strange, wasn't it? Well, on we go.
It's just it's just one of those situations where you could have seen how it could have been so much better, and I'm not mad, I'm disappointed.
It's fair.
I'm also not mad. This is one of the first books I've read in a while where I was like, I'm bored. And I shouldn't be, because this should be interesting, but I just don't care about any of these characters.
I guess because I read a lot of cozy books, I'm used to that very chill.
Well, I don't know, because
feeling.
I just finished reading like a slice of life, not even a romance, but like adjacent. Just this man's life, and I was like, nothing happens. This is a great book.
It just I didn't know where they were going. It's just like, why are they
Neither
doing
did
this?
Richard.
Half the time they didn't know where they were going. They just kind of fiddled about until the next door opened. It's like playing a terribly programmed video. It's like watching someone play Gauntlet.
I don't know what that is.
It's like watching me play Skyrim.
Gauntlet is an old video game where the whole point is just to wander around a dungeon and pick up as much treasure as you can, then go to the next level.
Skyrim.
And literally, that's what it felt like. They were just walking around the same rooms until the next door opened, and then they could leave to the next room where they walked around a bit until the next door opened so they could go to the next. It's like what the British soldiers used to sing when they were in World War II, which was, we're here because we're here, because we're here, because we're here. And
I think it might be because it's like a quote unquote fantasy book, that you either need your fantasy to be like so in the background that I'm not thinking about it, or it's got to be in your face. But like it's kind of in the middle, which reminded me a lot of actually reading Inkheart.
Yeah.
Which also got boring eventually, because I was like, they're just going back and forth. Something amazing should be happening. Go back to once again, the villain in that book should have been the main character of the book. Capricorn was so cool.
But was he?
Capricorn was pretty cool, but he didn't spend enough time focused on him. Or she, I don't remember. The author. They didn't spend enough time focusing on the idea, the concept of a plan.
Okay. Well, I feel like that we've pretty much said everything we can say.
I just want to go on record as saying I don't hate this book. I don't. I'm not mad I read it. I just don't want to read it again.
And that's okay.
How do you feel, Celeste? Coming on here sick, getting your book disliked.
Honestly, this is one of those things. I picked this because I thought John would like the world. And so now I'm like, well, maybe not.
No.
The world, he did.
I enjoyed the world. It was the plot that frustrated me. So
that's fair.
That's the reason why I wanted to reiterate. I didn't hate this book. If you champion world building over plot pacing, it's going to be more aligned towards you. It won't necessarily. I can't guarantee it's going to be your jam, because our world builder fan of our podcast wasn't so much into it. So, but as far as me, who likes their world to be built within the plot,
yeah, it would make a good video game setting.
It'd make a good setting for a lot of things. It's just I don't feel like it was properly utilized.
Yeah.
Well, I did not have any spiritual speculations or anything like that from this book. I'm sure I did. But
when God closes a door, sometimes they open another one in a wall.
We here at We religiously do not hold to that.
Yeah. Please don't try to open walls.
Unless you have a knife from a mythical hunter.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a thing.
Yeah. Don't wander off with strangers either.
But feel free to play games with strangers.
Yeah. You should do that. Read books with them too.
Different.
Which you can do with us if you join our Discord.
Speaking of community interaction, we had an email come through last night, and I would just want to shout out to whoever, the person who said, who made their email, please don't email this, it's a fake. thank you for sending us that email. We loved it. Squid and I, and maybe John, will also be checking out the podcast you recommended to us. If you ever
I love
want
that email address. Thank you.
you're welcome. I was trying to see if Dallas had put it in the message, and he did not.
Nope.
But no, it was something like that. It was like, please don't try to email this. It's a throwaway account, something to that effect.
This is not the email you're looking for.
Right. So whoever you are, please don't email. Thank you for your email. We appreciate it. We love hearing from fans. So you can email us. You can also just join the Discord and be chatty Cathy with us.
Yeah, you can join the Discord just to disagree with us if you like. That's
just
what
to
I
disagree
do.
with us.
So that's my job usually. So
forever
join me.
The contrarian.
We do have someone in the Discord who was avidly waiting for the Shark Heart episode because she got to listen to me complain about it as I was reading it.
Yep.
And so she was like, I want to know what everyone else said.
Gotta see.
I was not back for that episode, so
you would not have enjoyed it.
I did. In listening to the episode itself, I could tell that was not an episode for me. So
no.
It's not a book for everyone, I would say, but boy, was it for me.
Well, anyway, I don't remember how we end these things.
Well, it's your job, so we're going to be here a while.
Okay. Well, so long, and thanks for all the fish.
We Read Allegedly is part of the Devoted Geeks Network, devoted to letting you know that you're loved. If you liked what you listened to, please leave a review or a comment. We would love to hear from you. This month, we read Neverwhere by Neil Gaimen, and you can join us next month and every first Saturday as we review a new book. Next month, we'll be reading By the Light of Dead Stars. We'll see you then.